In this tutorial, we'll take a look at the Sales Invoices module in JobPro. So from the home screen, if you want to take a quick look at any outstanding invoices in the system, you can click on the quick view arrow here, and then we can see any invoices that we may need to follow up on, for example, where we can click on an invoice to view it, or maybe go to the company screen or the contact screen from here as well. So there's multiple ways that you can create an invoice. One of them is simply by creating a new record in the Sales Invoices module and linking it to a customer, whether they're a company or an organization or just an individual. Then other ways of creating invoices include doing it from the company screen, from a customer in either companies or contacts, where we can click here and click on the account for a customer and create an invoice. Or for example, you can create an invoice from a quotation, you can create an invoice from a sales order, or you could also create an invoice from jobs. So if we look at the Invoices tab in Jobs, we can create a blank invoice linked to this job, or we can also create an invoice using chargeable costs on the job as well. And those chargeable costs could come from areas like purchase orders linked to the job, or miscellaneous expenses that are linked to the job as well. Also time logs that are linked to a job. And resource bookings, where you might be booking in items like either people, assets, or even locations, or renting out things to customers. So any of these areas can be invoiced out from a job. So let's go to a customer screen first of all. And here's a customer that has a number of invoices in the system. So from here we can actually print a statement, and it'll show all the outstanding invoices and the age analysis as well with the total amount due. So we'll create an invoice from this customer. And here we are in the invoice screen. It's automatically linked the invoice to the company. But if we want to change who the contact is, we can click on the icon here and use a different contact. It automatically used the account or default contact on the invoice. But let's say that this invoice is going to this person. So we can also specify a different shipping address as well if relevant. So if this sales invoice was created from maybe a quote or a sales order, and those transactions had a different shipping address, well then that would have followed through to the invoice also. So on top of the invoice screen we've other information like the status of an invoice. If it's linked to a job, we can also link an invoice to a job from here. And over on the right hand side we can set the payment terms, which usually default from the customer's account. We can also flag the invoices paid with an auto pay feature, which automatically sets the status of the invoice to paid, but also creates a receipt against that invoice. So we can also see then the payment due date, which in this case is today. We can do a search on any invoices that are outstanding. The default tax code comes in here, which we can edit. So this also comes from the customer's account record. But based on the default tax code, as we add line items in here, it'll then use the correct tax rate. Now this default tax code is very useful if you're integrating JobPro with other accounts packages as well. We can insert a customer purchase order number, and there is a preference at the account level of the customer that you can specify that a PO number is required on all invoices before you can print or email them. So if that's the case for a customer and you try and print or email an invoice, you'll get a warning if you haven't put in the customer purchase order number in here. So we can also specify then a different identity for an invoice if you've got multiple identities in the system, like multiple companies or multiple stores or departments within the one organization. And if stock is relevant as well, where you've got multiple stock locations in the system, then you can change which stock location is relevant to this invoice so that when you ship the goods, it'll reduce the quantities in stock at that specific location. So on the lower half of the invoice screen is where we put in the line entry details or the text entry details for an invoice. Now the difference is that line entry is more about codes and descriptions coming from your products or services module. And text entry is more about entering in paragraphs of text. So let's click on line entry and we'll add in a product on this invoice. And we'll put in a quantity. We can see that there's an available quantity of 17 at this stock location for this particular item. So we put in a quantity of 4. Also, we can ship directly from the invoice as well. Now in some cases you'll create an invoice from a sales order. Now the full functionality in relation to sales orders is covered in another video tutorial, but in sales orders you can fully invoice or part invoice and ship from a sales order. So there is potential that invoices are created from sales orders and also auto shipped at the same time. And the purpose of an auto ship option in JobPro means that for any users that need to reduce stock for items but that don't specifically want to use the shipping module or print out like a delivery docket or a shipping note, well then they can set a preference and set up that on the creation of an invoice from various places in the system, like a sales order, that it should auto ship automatically. Now in here we can create a shipping record relating to this invoice if it's for an item that you're actually going to be shipping. But this could be a service in here, so there'd be no need to ship at all. So let's click a create. Click OK. And because this item is tracked by serial numbers, we need to specify the 4 serial numbers that we're actually using for the shipping record. So let's just pick the first 4 in the list by clicking on the label at the top of this column. Click continue. And now we're brought into the shipping module, where we can see that it's linked to invoice 5004, and we can go back to that invoice by clicking here. Now when we print this document, which basically is the shipping document, it'll include the serial numbers on that, and there is an option in setup whether you want to include serial numbers on a shipping docket either. So if we now go back to the invoice by clicking on the link, we can see that it has been shipped, and we can click on view if we wanted to view the shipping record from here again. So the text entry tab in Sales Invoices, as mentioned earlier, is more about where you want to type in paragraphs of text. It just makes it easier then to visually see what will appear on the printed invoice. You can also specify in setup that on printing an invoice, if a customer also owes on other invoices, that it will include an age debt analysis at the bottom of the invoice. So let's take a look at that in setup. In here there are various options to do with sales invoices, and all of this information is included in a separate video tutorial under setup and preferences for sales invoices. But in here we have the ability to include an age debt analysis at the bottom of an invoice if relevant. We've also the ability to include the customer's tax number or their VAT number. This is useful for some countries like in Europe, where if you're selling goods or services to other European countries, and those companies or customers have registered for VAT as well, well then you need to include their VAT or tax number on the printed invoice. So we also have the ability to include the product description on an invoice, as opposed to just the product name and the product code. So the product description is usually more like a paragraph of text of a description in relation to the product that you enter into the products module. Or it could also be a service that's entered into the products module, because both products and services are entered into that module. So if we now return back into the sales invoice module, and then if we click on print for that invoice, we can see that the age debt analysis is now included at the bottom of the invoice. So there are a couple of ways of marking this invoice as paid. One of them, and probably the easiest, is that if it's fully paid, we can just do an auto pay by clicking this tick here. And that will set the invoice status to paid, and it'll also create a full receipt linking the invoice and the receipt together. Alternatively, you can click on the Receipts tab and you can create a receipt from here. And then another option is, especially if the customer has overpaid or has paid a receipt that covers more than one invoice, well then you can go directly into the Receipts module and create a receipt for that customer. If we link it to the customer, or actually it was the other customer, so let's change that. And then we can see any outstanding invoices for that customer that we can allocate the receipt against. Okay, so if we go back into sales invoices, and if we auto pay, because this is the easiest way, we click OK to that message. So it's set the status of the invoice to paid, and it's created an invoice. And it's easier because we're not actually brought into the receipts module. So even if we want to print the receipt from here, we can click on the print icon, or email that receipt either. We can do that from here. To view the receipt, we can just click on the arrow. And there's the receipt allocation for that amount against that invoice. And we can go back to the invoice by clicking on this arrow here. So on the right hand side it shows the total invoice, total receipts, and the balance is now 0 for that invoice. So on the other tab in sales invoices, we've got other preferences like whether this invoice is a line entry or text entry invoice. Now normally you don't necessarily need to go near this field, because in setup you can specify for every created invoice to either use as a default line entry or text entry. Also, if there's a fax number linked to that company or contact, you can then create a fax from here, or you can enter a heading on the printed invoice, or you can also use your own letterhead for the printed invoice as well if you wanted to print on pre-printed stationery. You can enter in some comments on the invoice that will print out at the bottom of the invoice. And also in setup you can specify your default comments that would appear on every invoice, where you can edit them at an invoice level as well. So there's your comments appearing on the invoice. Then also we can log any communications relating to this invoice, like maybe a note where you followed up on the invoice, or it could be even an email reminder, create a letter or fax, or just a general message to other internal users relating to this invoice in here. And on the right hand side we've got a commission section where you can specify who's going to receive commission for this invoice, and then the sale and cost of sale amount will automatically appear, but you can override those by manually editing the fields, and it'll show the profit for the commission, and the rate that you want to use for that particular contact that's getting commission, and whether it's going to be based on the sale amount or the profit. Now you can set up default rates for each employee in their employee record. So if a specific employee is being used for commission purposes on an invoice, well then their rate will automatically enter in here. And that will then show you the commission amount, and you can flag whether it's been paid or not. So the bottom part of this other tab is where you can set up your custom fields for the sales invoices module. And in setup you can specify what you want to call your custom 1, 2 and 3 fields. So then we've got the list tab in sales invoices. So in here we can do searches on company and contact and various other information, and view and sort found sets of information at the sales invoice level. Useful if you want to see quick totals for certain invoices and maybe print off a list. So then on the other tab, or on the options tab in sales invoices, we've got a lot of different options in here, like find options, customer report based options, like a report by customer detailed including tax amounts, by customer summary with the highest figures first, or by a report by area. For each customer you can set up areas, or tax reports, report by products, report by categories, where you can set up a category for each product in the system, and you can do various commission reports as well. And then for the current invoice, you've got options like printing an invoice, emailing an invoice. You can print an email in different languages as well, print labels using the shipping address for an invoice, create an email letter or fax or receipt, or create a shipping record relating to the current invoice. Now most of these options you can do from the actual invoice screen as well. For the found set of invoices, in this case we've got 39 records in the found set. You can print all the invoices. You could print a mini list of those invoices, which is like a little mini report. And back on the options screen you can print labels for those invoices, and print labels using the shipping address for the found set of invoices as well. There's also a quick time to number converter, which is useful if you log time relating to jobs and you want to then create an invoice where you're charging out based on an actual time. So let's say you're charging out and it's based on a time of 10 hours 25 minutes. And then you can see that you can enter in a number of 10.42 on the invoice line item, and that will represent a number for the time of 10 hours 25 minutes. So on the right hand side we've got accounts receivable and statement related functionality. So we can basically look at all accounts receivable for all outstanding in the system, and that gives us a report summarized by customer, showing all their invoices and the amounts outstanding and where it comes in the age debt analysis section. And we can browse through that report by using the arrow keys on your keyboard. So if we hit enter, it'll bring us back. And also on the options tab, accounts receivable report, similar to the last, but based on the current found set of records. So we might only want to include a certain set of invoices in that report. So we would do a search, pull up the found set that we want to include on the report, and then click that button. Then we can also do statements for all outstanding accounts or invoices in the system. So here we can see we've got 10 statements that we can print off, and we can use the arrow key to browse through those statements. And we'll hit enter to bring us back. Other options for statements, where you can just do statements outstanding for the current company In other words, at the moment we're on an invoice for this customer. So if we wanted to just do a statement for everything outstanding for that customer, we can click that button and up comes the statement. It's just a quick and easy way when you're browsing through invoices. If you want to email off or print off a statement specific to one customer, you can do it by that option. And then we've got an option where we could pull up a found set of invoices in the system, maybe invoices that have gone over 30 or 60 days, something like that, and we can print statements for the found set of invoices. And then we also have the ability to print off a payments received report. You can also do this from the receipts module as well, but from within here we can specify what find criteria we want to use, like maybe any receipts based on a particular month of the year. So for example 06/2012, so that would be anything in June 2012, and we click continue, and that would give us a report of all receipts based on those dates. Or we can also base the report on maybe a customer or anything that came in with a specific payment method, or any other information that we want to use in relation to that receipts report from here. So invoices can appear in various parts in the system. Like if you were looking at a customer screen, on the accounts tab you can see the invoices portal, where you can create an invoice or print a statement from here. You can also see a sales invoices tab from the job screen, and from various other places in the system, like a sales account. Finally, the last thing to have a quick look at is that on your dashboard, here you can see also any sales invoices that are outstanding. So your dashboard is like a mini version of the quick view area on the home screen, where for all these areas as well, like sales invoices and receipts, you can see what we call a quick view area for anything outstanding usually in the system, like outstanding invoices, and you can view them from here. So that pretty much covers the sales invoices module and invoices functionality throughout the system.